Opposed, nay. Samuel J. Casella is hereby confirmed. Secretary will read.
As member of the Lake George Park Commission, Catherine Aiken-Lombard of Queensbury.
Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're putting forward the name of Catherine Aiken-Lombard of Queensbury as a new appointment as a member of the Lake George Park Commission. I know that this is a very important position because of the importance of Lake George, not only to our state, but to our economy, especially through tourism and making sure that Lake George is well managed. So again, I would urge my colleagues here in the Senate to approve this nomination.
Are there any other members who wish to be heard on the nomination? Hearing none, the question is on the nomination of Catherine Lombard as member of the Lake George Park Commission. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Catherine Lombard is hereby confirmed. I apologize. Senator Little.
Don't apologize. I was not paying attention, so I'm sorry. I just want to speak on behalf of this nominee and thank the governor for nominating Kathy Lombard to the Lake George Park Commission. She has a great background being a former chemistry teacher. She's volunteered at the Lake George Association, been grown up on Lake George, and will do a great job on the Park Commission. I appreciate the appointment. Thank you.
Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, just an announcement before we do the last group in mass of nominees. The next order of business will be to go back to the active calendar, the original active list plus Senate supplemental calendar 54A, to do each of the bills that were laid aside. So everyone in my hearing, either in this chambers or elsewhere, if you've got one of those bills, we'd appreciate you coming down. Or if you want to debate a bill, please come down now so that we can move efficiently. Thank you.
The Secretary will resume.
As members of the Public Health and Health Planning Council, Judy L. Baumgartner of North Tonawanda, John D. Bennett Jr. of Loudonville, Howard S. Berliner of Brooklyn, Angel Alfonso Gutierrez of Buffalo, Jeffrey A. Crott of East Meadow, Scott P. LaRue of New York, Nilda I. Soto of the Bronx, Theodore J. Strange of Staten Island, and Patricia Yang of New York.
Senator Young.
I forward these names to the Public Health and Health Planning Council in New York State. This council has a broad array of responsibilities that are crucial to all New Yorkers. They have decision-making responsibilities. They make recommendations regarding public health and other issues that are related to the healthcare delivery system. They all are highly qualified, and they are strongly recommended. So thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any other members who wish to be heard on the nominations? Sure? Okay. Seeing none, the question is on the nominations of the nominees as read by the Secretary. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The nominees, as read by the Secretary, are hereby confirmed. Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, can we now go to the active list for today and in order that they were laid aside?
Very good. Secretary will read. Secretary will ring the bell. Secretary will read.
Calendar number 52 by Senator Lanza, Senate Print 3709B, enactment of general municipal law.
Senator Krueger, why do you rise?
Would the sponsor please yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I do, Mr. President.
Sponsor yield. Senator Krueger?
Thank you. So if this bill became law, and we've had this discussion many times, how much revenue would the City of New York lose per year?
Mr. President, through you, according to the City of New York, none.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to
Sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Krueger?
So the memo of opposition from the City of New York says it would lose several $billions a year. the City of New York's memo of opposition isn't their position? Through you, Mr. President?
Through you, Mr. President, I'm glad Senator Kruger brought that up. I wasn't going to speak about the memorandum in opposition, but since she brought it up, I will. At the beginning of the memorandum, it says that this bill is not necessary because the city has not and will not raise property taxes more than 2% in effect. And at the very end of the memorandum in opposition, it says that if enacted, this bill would cost the city billions of dollars in necessary tax revenue every year. So it can't, both cannot be true. You would only lose tax revenue under this legislation prospectively if you intended to raise taxes by more than 2%, which the city says it has no intention of doing. So I'll take them at their first argument, and by doing so and accepting that they have no intention to raise taxes more than 2%, this legislation would cost the city nothing.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes,
Sponsor
Mr.
yield.
Yes,
Sponsor
Mr.
yields.
Thank you. I actually think the sponsor and I read his law and the city's memo differently, because the city's memo is referencing the total property tax revenue as only 2.33% of the total full market value, down from 2.4% in fiscal year 2000. So looking at the market value with property taxes and whether you're actually putting a freeze or a cap on property taxes are two different things. I will take it at face value that the city would lose billions of dollars in tax revenue. And in fact, as we have seen from property tax caps in the rest of the state, it is also causing those localities to lose revenue. We have seen increases in the fiscal stress on localities, worsening existing inequalities and threatened economic development. And so the record is when you when you cap the property tax, you are actually lowering the revenue coming in to the locality. Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
The sponsor continue to yield.
I do.
Sponsor yields.
If, in fact, this tax cap did the same thing all the other tax caps are doing, which is lower the amount of revenue available to the locality, what would you propose the city cut out of its budget because it would no longer have the money to pay for it?
Through you, Mr. President, again, I will take the mayor and the city at its word when they say that they have not raised taxes and have no plan to raise taxes. And in fact, the mayor testified some time ago right here in the Capitol, and we discussed this legislation. And again, the mayor said that he had no intention to raise taxes. And what this bill simply does, Mr. President, is provide the same protection for the people of the city of New York against unreasonable tax increases as we have already provided the people in the rest of the state of New York. And this is very necessary, especially, perhaps more than any place in the state of New York, in New York City, because unlike the rest of the state, Mr. President, we have an income tax. There is a water bill. We hear talk so often, especially coming from the city, about affordable housing and the need for more affordable housing. I would submit to this body that one of the biggest obstacles in the way of affordable housing and allowing people to own their own home in the city of New York is this whole basket of tax that is placed upon the citizens of our state. It's very expensive to live in an apartment or own a house in the city of New York. And the biggest cost, in many respects, in terms of that ownership, are all the taxes imposed by the very city who says it wants to provide affordable housing to people. And so this is very necessary. I hear from my constituents all the time that the taxes are too darn high, and it's hard to make ends meet in the city of New York. We're driving too many families away from New York, and we need to put an end to this outrageous, or the way I would put it is we need to have government act within its means in the same way we expect families and businesses to. And this bill, I think, would go a long way in making that happen.
Through you, Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Kruger on the bill.
So, again, I've raised my voice in objection to this bill quite a few years, but I'm never really that worried because it's a one-house bill. I think that the sponsor and I do agree there is a fundamental problem with the structure of property taxes in the city of New York. It has to do with the maldistribution in the system of how it applies taxes to different types of housing in different parts of the city. There are actually some people who are paying too little in comparison to others who are paying too much. What I can't agree with is that capping the tax and telling the city of New York, which, by the way, we seem to tell them what to do lately all the time in a different way than we tell the rest of the state, but I can't accept that we would tell the city of New York that they would have to decrease their revenue from property taxes and cut their budget without the state of New York inserting itself in to assist them. I hope they will take up the challenge we have thrown down at them over and over again to reevaluate and reform their property tax system. I hope the entire state of New York will take up the challenge to recognize in the 21st century a property tax is perhaps not the most effective way to tax our citizens to ensure that we're collecting the revenue we need to run government services, and yet we're operating on a tax system that might have made sense when we were an agrarian economy, but by and large most of the state is not an agrarian property-based system anymore. So really we need 21st century taxes. We don't have them. We all hear complaints from people. This is not a solution. It would actually just add to the problem. And again, I'm a resident of City of New York, just like Senator Lanza. When people look at their property taxes in the 5 boroughs compared to if they lived in Long Island or Westchester, they go, wow, we pay a whole lot less in property tax than those people do. So I don't necessarily accept that if you had a rational dialogue with the voters about reforming the tax system in the city of New York, that the biggest complaint would be the property tax amount, but rather the unfair distribution of it and the need to understand it in the context of other taxes they pay, because the sponsor's correct. New York City has an income tax, and if we didn't, our property taxes would be much, much higher. Although if I stay around this place long enough, maybe we'll outlaw the New York City income tax also, and then we can have an even greater discussion about how we starve the government of a city, providing quality services for 8.5 million people, not having a population drain. In fact, probably one of the only areas of the state that isn't having a population drain, and having actually a quite vital economy that helps to feed and water the rest of our state. So I urge a no vote. I've been here 14 years. I would love to have a serious discussion about a complete overhaul of tax system for equity and progressivity, and I suspect that we could agree the system we have isn't really working for anyone, but this isn't a solution. I vote no, Mr. President.
Any other members who wish to be heard? Hearing none, the debate is now closed and the Secretary will ring the bell. Senator DeFrancisco?
By agreement with the leadership, what we're going to do is go on to the next debate and then hold the roll open, go to all debates that we can get in, then vote in lump sum so people aren't running in and out, and we're looking for voters. So if we could go on, we could hold the vote and go on to the next lay aside.
The bill is laid aside temporarily. Secretary will read the last section.
Nope. Next bill.
The next bill.
Calendar number 1069 by Senator DeFrancisco, Senate Print 6724B, an act to amend the Public Service Law.
Senator Hoylman, why do you rise?
Would the sponsor yield to a few questions?
Will the sponsor yield for questions? May we have order in the House, please? Thank you. Will the sponsor yield for questions?
Yes.
The sponsor will yield. Senator Hoylman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, under this bill, any revenue increase of over $700,000 by NYSERDA would require the prior approval of the Public Authorities Control Board, including a full cost-benefit analysis, public comment period, and hearings. Is that a correct reading of the bill?
It's a correct reading, but it only applies to the review of the monies that are generated by ratepayers.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
The sponsor yield.
Yes.
Sponsor will yield.
According to Section 3B, as I read it, as it says, would increase revenues obtained from ratepayers or taxpayers by more than $700,000. Does the sponsor see that the word taxpayers is included in addition to ratepayers?
There's two sources, Reggie and the Clean Energy Fund. Can you tell me what you're referring to, or maybe both? I don't know.
Well,
Senator Hoylman.
Through you, Mr. President. It says in Section 3B, an increase in rates, charges, surcharges, assessment fees, levies, or other collections which could increase revenues obtained from ratepayers or taxpayers by more than $700,000, in which revenues are collected solely for and directed to NYSERDA and would be effectuated through a single order decision or series of such activities.
Senator DeFrancisco. Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, collection from ratepayers, people who pay their energy bills, for the Clean Energy Fund programs and the like. Reggie is funded in a totally different way. Reggie is funded by the generators, by the sale of the various tax credits. So that's why there's a difference in the two answers.
Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sponsor yield.
But it's my understanding, and I'm
The sponsor continue to yield. Senator DeFrancisco. Yes.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
But it's my contention that utilities are taxpayers as well. Isn't that correct?
No, we're not collecting from the utilities. We're collecting from, for Reggie anyway, we're collecting from sales of tax credits.
Not tax credits, environmental.
Sponsor will yield. Senator Hoylman. Sponsor yields.
Thank you. Then who purchases the credits? The credits, credits from NYSERDA, from Reggie rather. Who purchases those?
Generators that have too many emissions, and so they want to obtain those valuable credits,
Or they sell them.
or they can sell them.
It's a cap and trade program.
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
So doesn't he contend or consider the generators, the utility companies, to be taxpayers?
They're two different things because they're taxpayers. They pay maybe income taxes, they may pay sales taxes, they may pay other taxes, but the Reggie program deals with purchasing and selling credits when certain generators either generate too much energy or too little energy. The ratepayers that we're referring to on the oversight that this bill would provide are the people who get energy and pay their energy bill.
Would the sponsor continue?
Sponsor yields.
Would this legislation have any impact on Reggie in the sponsor's opinion?
Not at all. Irrespective of a memorandum of opposition, that is completely incorrect.
On the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Hoylman on the bill.
I disagree with the sponsor. I appreciate his explanations. I think utilities are taxpayers, and to think that, to require the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA to come begging, with hat in hand every time they want to modify program spending plans or have a fluctuation in the amount of funds they're collecting is really an unnecessary additional layer of bureaucracy and red tape. This is going to encumber RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, from operating. It is a market system where utilities purchase credits on an open market, which of course fluctuates as markets do. It's impossible to expect that the Public Service Commission would know what that market would be in advance and approve that in advance. It's effectively making RGGI inoperable. That's my reading of it. In the best case scenario, I think, I hope I've established to some of my colleagues at least that it's sufficiently unclear, and I'll be voting in the negative because RGGI is really New York's most important program to combat human-induced climate change. And while I appreciate the sponsor's explanation, I think there is a lack of clarity in the legislation, and I'll be urging my colleagues to vote in the negative. Thank you.
Are there any other members who wish to be heard? Hearing none, the debate is closed. Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, I know it's sometimes you can look over me, but
Not at all, Senator.
just very briefly, the purpose of this bill is, the Public Service Commission doesn't have to beg to anybody. They've got billions of dollars that they divvy up every single year, and that's in NYSERDA, and there's no oversight whatsoever. And I would think if we're going to do an efficient program, that we'd want some oversight, and we'd want to have a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether the money's being used the best way for clean energy purposes. And the ratepayers who generate that $1 billion that is being provided a year in the Clean Energy Fund, which I believe a few months ago, $5 billion of it was allocated for various programs, or at least is available to allocate. So the ratepayers have nobody to check the situation with NYSERDA. That's number one. As far as RGGI is concerned, despite the memo from the Environmental Advocates of New York, that's a program that really deals with selling energy credits, emission credits. If you have too many emissions, then you got to buy some credits. And if you get those credits, then it's credit instead of having to lower your admission. That has nothing to do with ratepayers paying into a fund for the Clean Energy Fund. That sustains itself. And so it's apples and oranges, and this bill is good for the taxpayers and good for the environment, with someone taking a look at the cost of the programs rather than an unelected group just saying, I like this one. This looks pretty good. Or maybe this one's the energy saving, the energy program of the day. Or maybe this is the popular energy program and it's the most politically sexy, or whatever it may be. We have to protect the taxpayers, and that's the purpose of this bill, the only purpose of the bill.
Seeing no other member wishing to be heard, the debate is now closed. Secretary will ring the bell. Bill will be laid aside temporarily. Secretary will read the next bill.
Calendar number 1271 by Senator Serino, Senate Print 7052, an act to amend the vehicle and traffic law.
Senator Latimer, why do you rise?
President, will the senator yield for a few questions?
Will the sponsor yield for a question?
Yes, I will, Mr.
Sponsor
President.
yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. Senator, can you explain the nature of the fees that this bill intends to eliminate?
I can tell you that this bill eliminates the MTA licensing and registration fees that are imposed on the residents of Dutchess, Putnam, Orange, and Rockland counties.
Thank you. Would the senator continue to yield?
The sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
Sponsor
President.
yields.
Thank you, Senator. Are those fees, in addition to being paid by Dutchess County, Putnam County, Orange County, and Rockland County, are they also paid by residents of Nassau County?
I believe they are, but the makeup on the way this is determined for Dutchess, Rockland, Orange, and Putnam, they only have 1/4 of a vote on the board for the MTA, totaling 1 vote, and that's not fair.
If the senator would
yields.
continue to yield to the president. Notwithstanding that the allocation of power on the MTA board favors some counties over others, the fee itself, is it not paid in the same percentage by residents in Nassau County and in other parts of the MTA payroll area, MTA service area?
Yes, and you know, I'll tell you about Dutchess County. We have approximately 300,000 people. 2% of our population utilizes Metro North on a weekly basis. So you have 98% of the people that are being penalized. And keep in mind, the 98% have vehicles that they are paying insurance on to go to work, school, and play. So then it's like a smack in the face every 2 years when they have to pay that $50 fee. And not just for their cars, for their trailers, you know, whether it be a recreational trailer or a trailer that somebody's going to work with, the landscaping trailer. It's been a level of frustration since 2009 when this was imposed by this body. So I've been involved in politics since 2010, so I've been hearing it for the past 6 years.
Would the senator continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Senator. Voices of those people in Nassau County, in Suffolk County, in Westchester County, in Richmond County, Kings County, Queens County, Manhattan County, and Bronx County will also have to pay this fee. Is it your sense that they also would rather not pay this fee as the residents of the 4 counties that you've identified in the bill?
I can only speak to the 4 counties that only have 1/4 of a vote. That's not fair.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Has the senator made an effort to contact, hold any types of public dialogue in Nassau County, Suffolk County, Richmond County, Westchester County, Bronx, Kings, or Queens or Manhattan County, New York County?
Personally, I have not. I've heard from my constituents with regard to only having 1/4 of a vote.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
Is there any legislation that you've proposed or that you're aware of that would relieve that burden that you've identified that affects some members of the MTA region that would be satisfied by this bill? Is there legislation that you're aware of that you've sponsored to relieve that burden in the other counties?
That I mentioned, the Orange, Rockland, Putnam, and Dutchess.
Mr. President, if I may repeat, I'm interested in knowing if you're aware, Senator, of legislation that would relieve the same burden that you've identified in the remainder of the MTA service area. We've identified that the fee that you're referring to is paid for by residents of 12 counties. This bill would relieve it in 4 of those counties, but not in 8 of those counties. So I'm asking as a question whether you have either sponsored yourself or you are aware of pending legislation that would relieve that burden in the other 8 counties that are affected by this fee.
It would only remove the fees for the 4 counties that have 1/4 of a vote each. The other counties would remain paying the bill.
Would the senator continue to yield?
Sponsor yield.
Yes.
Sponsor
Thank you,
yield.
Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your indulgence on this.
Certainly.
What is the correlation between the MTA payroll board, the MTA board's configuration and the relieving of this fee? That the fact that the MTA board has a different allocation based on individual area, is that germane directly to the liability of the individual who lives in any of these 12 counties to pay the fee?
You know, like I said, Senator, only 2%, I'm just talking about Dutchess County, we have the other counties too, that most of them are rural. 2% use it on a weekly basis. So it's a smack in the face to have to pay this fee.
I'll just remind both members to please direct their comments through the chair. Senator Latimer?
Would the senator continue to yield, Mr. President?
Sponsor
Yes.
yield? Sponsor yield.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. The percentage of usage in Suffolk County, Senator, do you have that percentage? You've identified that which is the usage in Dutchess County. Do you have a usage figure of what Suffolk County residents use the MTA system?
No, I do not.
Would the senator continue to yield?
Sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
And Senator, do you have a statistic of how much in Nassau or Westchester or any of the other counties the MTA system is used? You've identified again a percentage that's less than half, a lot less than half in your counties. Have you identified those in any of the other service counties?
No, no, I do not. But I can tell you that it's about 1/5 of 1% of the operating expenses are what would be eliminated. The MTA's operating expenses are about actually almost $14 billion to date.
Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Latimer on the bill.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for your responses to each of the questions. Mr. President, this bill, if the intrinsic value of it is to relieve a burden on taxpayers, then this should be a 12-county bill. The fact that Dutchess County or Orange County or Rockland County is underrepresented on the MTA board, I have personally co-sponsored bills that have been sponsored in both of these houses to correct that situation and to give a full vote for any county that's in this. But regardless of that, there is no direct correlation on this bill in relieving a financial burden to a ratepayer, taxpayer, whether they live in Dutchess County or Suffolk County, whether they live in Orange County or Richmond County, whether they live in Rockland County or Westchester County. If the fee is objectionable, then this bill should reflect relief of that cost for all 12 counties.
Senator Latimer, Senator Martins, are you raising a point of order?
President, would the Speaker yield?
As soon as I finish speaking on the bill, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you.
Senator Latimer.
Okay. The bottom line is this. If this bill is to be complete and fair, then it should relieve the burden equally across the 12-county region. Any resident of, any representative of Long Island who votes for this bill is satisfying some of the individuals, but not the individuals in their jurisdiction. And if this is an objectionable fee, as identified by the sponsor and the co-sponsor of this bill, then it should be relieved in all 12 of those counties. I don't think a selective relief of this is appropriate unless there's a dialogue about that and there's a discussion about the use of the MTA system. The percentage use of it clearly is less in some counties than in other counties, but it is also true that amongst the counties that have a higher percentage of use than Dutchess County, there is a gradation of use. A lot more people use this in New York County than do in Westchester County. So with that, I am prepared to vote in the negative, not because I believe that Dutchess, Orange, Rockland, and Putnam do not deserve this relief, but I believe that this bill ought to be broad enough to provide relief for my Westchester County residents and for the other residents as well. And with that, I will yield, if you would like, to any question from my friend from Long Island.
Senator Martins.
Thank you, and I thank the Senator for yielding. Just a couple of questions, because I think, frankly, Mr. President, through you, the Senator and I have worked in the past on measures when he was in the Assembly and I was here, and we co-sponsored legislation to repeal many aspects of the MTA payroll tax and precisely elements such as this. Would the Senator agree that repealing portions of this tax, even on portions of the MTA region, is something that we should strive for?
Through the President, I believe that repealing the overall tax at this stage of the game makes perfectly good sense. It was imposed at a moment of crisis. That crisis passed within 2 years of its imposition, and from that point forward, around 2011, I was prepared and co-sponsored bills. I believe Senator Lanza had a bill along those lines to fully repeal the tax in its entirety. The fact, Mr. President, that we have repealed pieces of it, I presume, are based on some kind of a correlation of money that the state has to compensate the MTA for the amount that would not be paid for, as we have exempted businesses of a certain size and less, as we have exempted libraries, as we have exempted other different entities. So I would say to the Senator, I would favor a full repeal. I would vote for that bill were that before us today, and that would be the best case scenario.
Mr. President, through you, if the senator would continue to yield.
I will.
Thank you. You know, having already established that it is probably a travesty in my mind and certainly in many of us in the MTA region that are still required to pay these fees long after they were first imposed, isn't this a good step in the direction if we understand that this is a bad fee? It shouldn't have been done when it was done, and certainly the time has come to this point where it should have been repealed, and I think there's consensus here where that is true, at least for many of us. I don't know if all of us. Isn't it true then that any step that takes that in that right direction that we should support?
Through the President, I think that this bill could very easily be amended as it is under the current sponsorship to be broadened and include all 12 counties. And that bill I would be glad to vote for, and I would think the constituents who we represent in Long Island, on Staten Island, and in the other counties that are not included in this bill would be happy to see that pass. I think we both know that this bill faces a very difficult future in the other house. And so if what we're trying to do tonight is to make a statement about what's right for the people of Dutchess County and Putnam County and Orange County, we should broaden that statement. And the right thing to do would be to make a statement that would be all-inclusive. And certainly in the majority side, there's an ability to modify the bill, and I would be happy to support a more broad-based bill that would include all of the counties.